Time now for our rants and raves, starting with you, Dan Kennedy.
I have a rave for the New York Times, which has published on its website this absolutely fantastic, detailed, interactive map of the 2016 presidential election. The Times pointed out that they've done this in previous elections, but they did it at the county level, 3,100 counties, now they've done it at the precinct level, 168,000 precincts. And unlike the county maps, you can see that in a very blue area, there may be a small red precinct, or vice versa.
And actually, we're not showing it in this, but it shows every single vote. I mean, exactly what the breakdown was. I mean,
absolutely.
You hit a little tiny precinct, and you can get exactly what the numbers were.
I just want to say, put together by Ryan Rolla, a doctoral student at Washington State University. Just a terrific piece of work.
It was. And it's gotten a lot of hits, apparently.
Yes, it has.
All right, Tom.
Yeah. This is terrible. We have two raves, I think, for the New York Times here. This was a story that was in Vanity Fair, vanityfair.com, about the New York Times' podcast, The Daily, which has become a surprise hit. There's now something like 1 million downloads a day of this 20-minute-long podcast done by Michael Barbaro, who was a political writer for the Times. But those of us who have been in our journalism, we all know that the best stories are usually the stories told by reporters to each other around the hotel bar at the end of the day after all the stories are filed. It's what did you do today, and here's the conversation. That's what the Daily does every day, and it's really gripping and fascinating stuff. So good on the New York Times for this podcast, which, by the way, could be a new source of revenue for newsrooms everywhere.
I think it's going to be.
Callie.
I have a rant and a rave. So first I want to rave for Weijia Jiang. She is the new White House correspondent for CBS, and she is fantastic. She was hired in 2015 for the News Path, which is the level down below that services all of the CBS affiliates, and she got bumped up to White House correspondent for the network. She is thorough. She asks the good questions. She is controlled. She is great. People need to watch her. So Weijia Jiang, that's my rave. And my rant is not against Ta-Nehisi Coates, but against the fact that he is leaving the Atlantic.
Oh, he is?
And yes, and he's been such a force and a power with that publication, so connected with it. He has said he has no plans that he's announcing now to go and do anything else, I think, regularly like this. He's probably going to write books. You remember he's doing the comics for Marvel, too, Black Panther and all the rest. So he's got a lot on his plate, which he always did. But I think the absence of the regularity of his opinions in that publication is a huge loss, and I'm sorry to see it.
Did it have anything to do with the magazine itself?
I don't think so. It doesn't. It appears everybody's, amiable, but it just is a. It's just sad.
It doesn't sound like he's angry, but it did sound like he was unhappy to be kind of used as a shield for the Kevin Williamson
that is true.
Situation.
Yeah, what was that again? They hired that guy?
That was this right-wing guy with some very, let's say, exotic views, and
they hired him, and then they said they had to edit him,
and then Ta-Nehisi had to get in the middle of it, but he'd been in the middle of other things that were just so. I think that it was probably, he's a MacArthur winner as well. He probably, I guess, probably has some of that money left over. So he can take some time to do some other things.
All right, Roy.
Well, Tom and Dan have said done a little bit of raving about the New York Times, but the New York Times cannot do it by itself. And so my rant is against Tronc, our favorite corporate name for the old Chicago Tribune Company, which devastated the New York Daily News by firing half of its people, including all its photographers. Remember the picture newspaper? That's what it used to call itself. And it's the way it did it that really shocked me. I sort of wanted to ask Dan if he knew if there was a mogul who could have stepped in there. But rather than find a buyer for it, a la the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, which they did when Tronc sold that, they just cut the publication in half. And all of this after the Baltimore Sun story with the Annapolis newspaper, which is also Tronc. All of the things they did to support them, now they've taken the New York Daily News, which had become a really fantastic investigative paper in the last few years. And it's really a shame that this has happened. I'm hoping someone can step in.
400 people in the newsroom in the late 80s. After these cuts, 45.
45 news people?
Yeah.
I don't see how they could put out a paper.
No.
Well, an
Lot of wire.
investigative paper especially, because that's what they've been doing very well the last couple of years.
All right, so I'm going to wind into this. I'm going to end up with a rave, but as we all know this week, Cox announced that all of its television stations, its television station group, is up for sale. And as you know, Fox 25, it used to be Fox 25, it's now Cox 25, or just channel, what do they call
Boston
it?
25
Boston
is
25.
the news, yeah.
So they, of course, are part of the Cox group, but someone over at Boston University, Susan Walker, my rave is for her, came up with a great idea. So as you all know, Bob Kraft was a partial owner, I mean, almost half, I think, owner of WHDH back in the 80s, I believe it was, maybe even the late 80s. And she's suggesting that Bob Kraft step in. I mean, he needs to diversify his portfolio anyway, right?
Yeah.
And buy Channel 25, because she claims he was a terrific owner, a real hands-on owner when he was part owner of Channel 25, I mean, HDH. Used to come through the newsroom, knew everybody's name, unlike the people at Trunk. So just like he is, a great owner of the Patriots.
I think it's a great idea. Make Bill Belichick the news director.
And you could probably get it for a song. There you go. Yeah, you could be really responsive, like the old days guys. What was that guy's name?
The criticism of Cox is that they never understood Boston, and I think the argument for bringing in Kraft is that he knows Boston. He's all, and the bureau is right next to the stadium.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to agree with that. I used to do some commentary over there with VB, and VB told them at the beginning, listen, this is Boston. It's totally different. They said, you don't know what you're talking about.
And they fired him.
Yeah.